Hello, USC fans. Connor Morrissette and Chris Trevino were here on campus for instant analysis. USC had its 7th training camp practice of the summer earlier today. And let's break it down, Chris. Lincoln Riley addressed the media after the session, and he started talking about realignment. His comment on Washington and Oregon joining the Big Ten was, I don't have any reaction. He also said, we're USC. We're going to do what's in the best interest of USC, implying that he didn't really care that the two schools joined the conference. Your thoughts on the realignment overall and Coach Riley's comments?
First off, I just want to go on record that I did not wear this shirt knowing that today was going to be the Armageddon Big Ten expansion of Oregon and Washington. So do not take any stock into that. But yes, basically his message was when we were going through the process of joining the Big Ten and moving conferences and doing that, we did that with the best interest of us, USC. It was all about us. We're focused on that. Their leadership, their academic, their president, all that was done with the intention of it being the best move possible for USC. So yes, he said, my reaction today is I have no reaction. We are focused on winning the Pac-12, and then we'll see and we'll move on to the Big Ten when that time comes. So he was all focused about doing here and the now, not really worrying about what other people are doing.
I'd be interested to hear USC fans' thoughts. If we were one-on-one with Lincoln Riley off the record and we asked him, hey, does the school care one way or the other? I bet a little bit of the school probably didn't want their two Pac-12 rivals joining the same conference that USC is in, but that's not what the coach said today, and we got to take what he said at face value, trying to read into that a little bit more. Let's get into what we saw at practice today, Chris, looking at some offensive line drills. Emmanuel Pregnon gets the bump. He's with the first team at left guard. Thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think our first instant analysis, we talked about Emmanuel, known as E-Man by his teammates, but we talked about how, he was working with that second team, but we both anticipated that at some point he was going to make a move into the first team and see how that looked. Today was that day. He slotted in there at left guard nicely with Jonah Monheim playing left tackle, Justin Dedich at center, Jarrett Kingston at the right guard, and then Michael Tarquin now on the right side. So that is your transfer-heavy line with those two veterans that are returning in Justin Dedich and Jonah Monheim. Looked very good offensive line-wise, so that moved Gino Quinones to the center position, which is going to be an interesting talking point at the backup center.
Yeah, let's talk about it right now. The backup center, Lincoln Riley said Killian O'Connor, the walk-on, has really impressed. And at the end of his college career, could he be the number 2 on the center depth chart for USC? He said it's certainly possible. So he likes what he's seen from Killian O'Connor, but today it was Gino Quinones there as that second-team center. How do you read into that playing time battle for the backup center role on this team?
Center's really interesting and something we don't really talk about that much because USC has been blessed the last several years with Justin Dedich as kind of that guy waiting in the wings when you had like an All-American caliber guy like Brett Nealon. But this year it is a huge thing to talk about because if Dedich, gets hurt, they have to shift somewhere. One of the most important positions on the offensive line is your guy in the middle, right there, which Caleb Williams under center. So that is going to be a big talking point this camp, and we saw it after practice yesterday. So many guys are just taking snaps. Jonah Monheim, Jarrett Kingston, Lonnie Noah, Amos Talalele, Micah Benuelos, Cooper Lovelace even worked at center. I think you were even taking some center snaps. Everyone was taking center snaps, so they're cultivating who is going to be that guy. But Killian O'Connor, the preferred walk-on, he operated as that second-team center all of spring camp, and he was here early in fall camp as the backup center once again, and it seemed like they were really putting emphasis on getting him developed. He was working with Caleb Williams after practice with Justin Dedich. I saw him talking to Lincoln Riley after practice, and Lincoln was very praiseful. Preferred walk-ons, they can make impact. They can have impact, and he seems like a guy who is built right to play that position. He seems like a smart guy. Guys talk highly of him, and yeah, he could possibly be your backup center. Lincoln Riley did say he's going to have to push hard for it because he's not a scholarship player. He has that kind of chip on his shoulder. Could that be Gino's spot? Could it be Jonah Monheim's spot? We don't know, but Killian O'Connor just seemed to be making a push to at least be in the conversation.
Earlier during your analysis right there, you mentioned Alani Noah, who, when Gino Quinones moves to second-team center, who moves to second-team left guard. Today it was Alani Noah, and yesterday, Chris, we heard really, really high praise from a bunch of Noah's teammates about him. Your thoughts on a true freshman alongside Elijah Page, also who's on that second unit offensive line at left tackle, two guys who seem to be maybe separating themselves from the pack a little bit in terms of some of these freshman offensive linemen.
Yeah, we knew coming in, one of those guys, of those 4 guys they brought in, somebody was going to make that second team unit. Someone was going to make a push. My pick was Alani Noah, and I feel really good about that. So 6'4", 320 pounds, and Cooper Lovelace downright giddy when he was talking about him yesterday, and he said, I know you can't watch the film, but I wish you could see some of the things he was doing on tape. And, he's flashes, and he was like, his eyes got big. Like, the flashes he's able to put forward are incredible. And he said he's going to be a phenomenally elite player here at USC. So, yeah, you just look at him and you're like, that guy does not look like a freshman. He looks like a Mack truck coming at you. So, yeah, it's nice to see one of the freshmen kind of move up. Elijah Page, we know he has the advantage having been the early enrollee, and they're very big on him, and he looks like he's even gained weight as well. But that left side looking pretty good for USC with those freshmen. Still young, obviously, they're going to make mistakes, but if you can get them developed and, get them a couple snaps here early in the season, who knows what's going to happen down the line. Just at least get them in a position where you think they can be ready to contribute if something happens.
Yeah, and it's important, too, just because these freshmen are second on the depth chart right now doesn't necessarily mean if there's an injury they're going to play. It's all about getting the best possible output from the 5 guys. So, for example, if your left tackle, God forbid, Jonah Monheim goes down, it's probably the case where Michael Tarquin or Jarrett Kingston would slide over from their spot to take over instead of Elijah Page coming in. But never say never. Don't rule anything out. If Elijah Page continues to impress, is there a world where he could be that number 2 guy? Yes. I don't think that's very likely right now. Let's get to defense, though, Chris. A couple things. Didn't see a ton. At the rush end spot, Anthony Lucas is still in that group when we're able to watch practice. I thought, though, it was really interesting. We've heard a lot about Sam Green, and when the rush ends were doing some drills today, we talk a lot about who is doing the drills and when they're doing them. First, it was Jamil Muhammad at the rush end, and then the second rush end was Sam Green, and then Anthony Lucas was third. Sam Green, he's had a great spring, a great fall camp so far, and it looks like he's continuing to really impress. I think the fact that he's taking that second rep, some people might say, okay, that doesn't mean anything. I put a little bit of stock into that, and I know you do too.
Yeah, we actually talked about before we got on, #drill hierarchy. That's what I dubbed it, and people think I'm crazy. But I think what place you're taking the rep in kind of says a lot about, where you are in the depth chart. It doesn't always mean everything, but to see Sam Green kind of taking that second rep behind Jamil Muhammad, who a lot of us think is going to be the projected first-team rush end when it's all said and done, I think that's significant. Anthony Lucas obviously involved there as well, a guy who played defensive end in the spring, now is moving more to rush end, getting more looks there. So I think Sam is going to be an impactful player for this team. Obviously he's a freshman. He's a little bit undersized, doesn't have the length of some of those other guys, like an Anthony Lucas, like that 6'6" Braylon Shelby, the other freshman. But he has a motor on him. He makes plays in the backfield. Lincoln Riley talking about him in the spring. He put himself in position to be a part of this defense and help in this defense. And we saw what he was able to do in the spring game. So maybe doesn't have the length, but he's got the motor and the skill to get in the backfield. So I'm excited to see what kind of role he is able to carve out. I expect him to get some playing time in the first game. I'll go out and say that right now. But I think Anthony Lucas, Jamil Muhammad are still your top dogs in that room. At least they're getting Lucas more comfortable with the rushing position after splitting last year. But, yeah, Sam Green, look for him to have an impact in 2023.
I don't know how much we can take away from the defensive pursuit drills. It's at times random personnel, but today the first unit, Mason Cobb, Eric Gentry at the linebacker spots, at the 2 corner spots, Damani Jackson and Sierra Wright. Can we take away anything from these pursuit drills? I know we're a little bit cautious because sometimes it doesn't exactly line up the way they start warming up to how it looks on the field, but just thoughts on the defensive pursuit drills today. Can you take anything away?
You can, but you also cannot. You cannot put too much stock, but I think you can, learn a little bit here and there, because as I learned in my first Lincoln Riley fall camp last year, yes, you can see a little bit. For example, Sierra Wright kind of was dominating in those pursuit drills with the first team. So we're like, okay, I think Sierra Wright is going to be a starter, and ended up, hey, he's a starter. The other example on the other side of that, the other side of that coin is that Eric Gentry was operating with the second team all of fall camp in those pursuit drills, but who was starting day one in the first game? It's Eric Gentry. So I think there's a little bit of gaminess there. Who we truly are going to be as starters aren't necessarily working with the first team in that pursuit drill. So you can take a little bit, but also be cautious in putting too much stock in what you're seeing in those pursuit drills.
And maybe if you're new, like a transfer, you might not be up there with that first team like Gentry was a year ago. Maybe that had something to do with it. I don't know. I'm just spitballing here. Chris, let's wrap up with some more of Lincoln Riley's comments after practice. He also had some very interesting comments about the offensive line, because remember yesterday, Ryan and I went on Instant Analysis and we talked all about how Josh Henson was not happy with the offensive line's performance. I asked Coach Riley today, how did the offensive line respond? And he didn't really answer the question. He did say when expectations are so high, like they are for every position group on this team, we need guys to strain more. And I thought that was really interesting. He didn't call them out for a lack of effort, but he said, you got to be giving us a little bit more. And I think that was him saying maybe they didn't respond the way he was looking for today. I could be reading into it a little bit more. I thought that was an interesting response. He said, we need to strain more because expectations are so high. Your thoughts on those comments?
Yeah, it was kind of a non-answer. He could have easily come out like, oh, I thought they were great in our team periods and their run periods. I thought they were, pushing the defensive line back. He could have said any of that, but no, it was more we need to strain. So I think they did not maybe perform like we thought they would coming off a Thursday practice where Josh Henson wasn't as happy with their performance. But I think this is still a group that's gelling, still trying to get their feet under them with all these new faces in that room. So still early in fall camp, but this was being talked about, a week before the game. I think you'd be a little bit more concerned, but there's still time to kind of find that next level and that intensity with this group. And I think it's still going to be a really good offensive line. They're so talented. They're big. They have some guys who play with a nasty edge. I think they just still need to put it all together. And USC's defensive line is a lot better than it was last season. So I think if you're reading into that as well, I think you want to hear the defensive line is being more physical than this really stacked USC offensive line. So they got to go both ways. I think the USC offensive line still needs to get more of its confidence against this bigger, more athletic defensive line for USC. But in the end, the next couple of weeks are going to tell us more, and the first scrimmage is coming up as well, so I think that's going to tell us a lot where this offensive line is in terms of their physicality.
I agree. I think they'll get better, and it's tough with the defensive line being so talented. Okay, last thing, Lincoln Riley was asked about the depth of the receiver group, and he brought up the freshmen without being asked about the freshmen, which, as I've said a million times on the show, when someone's asked a question, not a specific one, and then they bring up players, that is significant. He talked about how the freshmen have really impressed. I think most fans expected that, at least some of them, but he really mentioned all four of the guys. Realistically, how many of these freshmen can get on the field in the fall, do you think, Chris?
I would say all of them. He mentioned that they're not super heavy numbers-wise when it comes to depth, so they have enough bodies in there where everyone could get a couple of catches here and there. Obviously you have your main line headliner guys like Dorian Singer, Brendan Rice, Mario Williams, Taj Washington. Those are going to be your four kind of main bell cows. But that rotation is pretty fluid. We've seen Zach Branch obviously been working with the second team since he arrived in spring camp. Deuce Robinson, still trying to get into the flow of things. Jacoby Lane, who Caleb Williams shouted out the other day. Yeah, all these guys can make plays. Mekhi Lemon, for him. He was banged up all spring, and I think people are forgetting about him. I just forgot about him to name them here. So that tells you, and he was borderline 5-star last year. So the amount of talent they brought in his freshman class is ridiculous. The best wide receiver class in the nation. So, yeah, they're going to find ways to get the ball in their hands, and you're hoping that they're going to have some blowouts this season, so you're going to be able to get those guys some run, get them some playing time in the third and fourth quarter. So I think all of these guys at some point are going to get on the field.
I did have a Zach Branch observation too. He made a routine catch during warm-ups, but then he started joking around with the official who was on the sideline a little bit, and I think that just shows how comfortable he is at USC. Again, not something I can take a ton away from, but it was cool to see him joking around, cool as can be. I think he really is comfortable here, so obviously that's encouraging. He's Chris Trevino. I'm Connor Morrissette. This has been Instant Analysis. Go to uscfootball.com for full coverage of the team all year long. If you're watching this, I'm sure you're already a subscriber, but if you're not, please subscribe. Helps us out. Thanks so much for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.